You're dead weight. I deserve better. That's what my wife said while serving me divorce papers. Because I lost my job, she thought I'd cry. What I did next made her beg and collapse in courtroom. As I walked away with everything. Hey Reddit, I thought I had the perfect life. Steady job, wife, nice apartment. Then I lost my job, and she called me dead weight and served divorce papers. That should have been the end, but it wasn't. Let me start from the beginning. I'm Callan Smith. I'm 34 now, but this all started when I was 32. For most of my 20s and early 30s, I thought I had it figured out. Solid career in logistics, stable, good pay, good benefits, decent apartment in the city, and Marissa. We met at a mutual friend's housewarming almost a decade back. She was the kind of woman who turned heads without even trying. Sharp, funny when she wanted to be, and quick with opinions. At first, I loved that edge. She said exactly what was on her mind, no filter, and I thought that honesty was rare. Over time, I learned it wasn't honesty. It was her way of keeping herself on top. To everyone else, we looked like a power couple. She curated the image like it was her side hustle. Vacations in wine country, matching Halloween costumes, the two of us at brunch with her friends every Sunday. She made sure the pictures always looked perfect. I didn't mind. I was never the type to care about Instagram. But behind all the filters and captions, things were different. She had a way of making me feel small without raising her voice. She'd joke in front of her friends that my job was just warehouse Tetris. If I mentioned wanting kids one day, she'd roll her eyes. Whenever her boss's husband came up, she'd casually point out how much more he earned than me. None of it was explosive, just little cuts that stacked up. I told myself I could live with it. That was my mistake. The cracks started showing clearer on my birthday. I'd gotten her a new laptop a few weeks earlier, something she'd been hinting about for her consulting business. Thought I'd nailed it. At my birthday dinner in front of friends, she unwrapped it, glanced at the box, and said, "Really? A laptop? That's practical, I guess." Then she turned to Greg, her spin class buddy, and said, "Remember when you got your sister that custom photo book? That's thoughtful." He laughed nervously. I sat there silent, ordered dessert, and thought, she just made my birthday about her gift standards. I didn't say a word that night, but something clicked. 2 weeks later, the company merger hit. My department was axed overnight. I got the HR speech, the severance packet, the handshake. That was it. I texted Marissa the news on the train home. Her reply, "So what now? You're just going to sit around all day? No call, no, we'll figure it out." Just that. That night, she didn't come home. Next morning, she walked in carrying 2 iced coffees, both for her. She put a manila folder on the counter like it was junk mail. Divorce papers. "You're dead weight. I deserve better," she said. Then she left again. I stood there in the kitchen staring at the papers, and instead of anger, I felt quiet, just a strange clarity. I took the spare key off my ring, set it down next to the folder, and looked around the apartment. Half the furniture was already hers anyway. My name was on the lease, but everything else in that place screamed her. So I packed a bag, a couple shirts, my laptop, the notebook I'd had since college, and my lifting belt. Called a landlord I knew through work and rented a small month-to-month studio the same day. The new place wasn't much. Peeling paint, a neighbor who vacuumed at midnight, and just enough room for a mattress on the floor, a plastic table, and a pull-up bar in the doorway. But it was mine. First morning there, I woke up at 5. Did push-ups and squats until my arms shook. Scrambled eggs, oats, cold shower. I sat down with my laptop and started emailing every warehouse contact I could find. Offered to do free on-site efficiency checks. 25 emails before noon. Put the responses in a spreadsheet. That afternoon, Rob came by. He's been my best friend since high school, now a junior associate at a small litigation firm. Bar card barely a year old. He brought over a $30 printer and a stack of file folders. We sat on the floor and he showed me how to screenshot texts, date stamp them, and print copies. Don't argue with her. Don't reply. Just document. Evidence wins, not emotion. We labeled the first folder Marissa Communications. As if on cue, later that night she texted, "Hope you're okay." No apology, no responsibility, just that. I didn't answer. I screenshotted it, dropped it in the folder, and went back to drafting outreach emails. The studio was dead quiet, but for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for her to approve or disapprove of what I was doing. It was stripped down, uncomfortable, and weirdly freeing. That was day 1. No fights, no speeches, just a decision. She could play her games. I was going to rebuild in silence. The routine stuck. 5 a.m., eggs and oats, cold emails logged in a spreadsheet, study blocks, and the discount gym to close the day. The grind was boring but steady. After about 2 weeks, I finally got a real bite. A manager at a cross-dock warehouse in the industrial district replied. His email was short. We're behind schedule and my guys are complaining. If you think you can help, come by next Tuesday at 9 o'clock. I spent the next few days preparing, printed a map of their address, traced the traffic patterns leading in and out, and marked potential choke points. Looked up the company's shipping volume online, made a checklist for the walkthrough, door usage, staging area, signage, pallet flow. I kept it simple, stuff I'd learned from years in logistics, written in bullet points. Tuesday morning, I showed up 10 minutes early in plain work clothes. The place looked rough, cracked asphalt, 2 loading doors half blocked by pallets, a line of trucks idling out front. Inside, the break room smelled like burnt coffee and grease. The manager, Tony, was red-eyed and chewing gum hard. Look, I don't have time for a sales pitch, he said. Just tell me what's wrong. I walked the floor with him trailing behind. Right away, I saw it. Staging lanes crisscrossed, doors not labeled, returns stacked in the same space as outbound shipments. Workers were zigzagging pallets back and forth like ants with no map. I timed one guy dragging a pallet from the return pile to the far dock. 7 minutes wasted. Did that 3 times an hour and the whole shift lost hours of labor. I pulled out my notebook and sketched a rough diagram. You've got returns clogging outbound. Switch this door to returns only. Tape off staging lanes so they don't cross. Label each dock with color-coded signage. That alone cuts the back and forth in half. Tony squinted at the sketch. You think tape and markers fix this? Try it for a week, I said. If it doesn't help, throw it out. Cost you about $30. He shrugged. Fine. Send me a write-up. That night, I typed a 2-page plan, straight to the point. Page 1. Current issues with photos. Page 2. Recommended fixes, cost, and expected impact. No buzzwords, no fluff. Just, do this. It saves X minutes. Sent it off. 3 days later, he called. We tried your layout. Dwell times dropped, returns aren't choking us anymore. Come back Monday. When I showed up, the workers actually looked less miserable. Tony handed me a small check. 30 days. You keep helping, I'll keep paying. It wasn't a fortune, barely covered rent and groceries, but it was real money earned on my own. I walked out with the paper in my pocket, feeling like I'd just landed a Fortune 500 contract. First thing I did was stop at a used office furniture shop, bought a real desk and a chair that didn't squeak, hauled them up the narrow stairs of my studio, set them in the corner, and stared at them like trophies. That night, Rob swung by. He saw the desk, smirked, and said, Big shot now, huh? I laughed, but he was serious. Don't lose focus. One pilot isn't stability. Keep stacking them. He pulled out his laptop and reviewed some of the legal documents with me, making sure I wasn't missing deadlines. My cousin Aaron called the next day. He'd served in the Marines, now worked construction. His advice was simple. Discipline is easy when things are bad. The test is when it starts getting better. Don't let up. Even my old foreman Miller checked in. He'd heard about the layoff and said, keep your head down, make yourself useful, and people will pay. Logistics doesn't care about excuses. I wrote that one down. Between the 3 of them, I had accountability covered. Rob for legal, Aaron for discipline, Miller for experience. That week, Marissa's number lit up my phone again. Number lit. This time it was sharper. You'll regret ignoring me. I read it twice, then laughed. I screenshotted it and thought, I regretted not having popcorn ready for this performance. I didn't reply. I never did. Instead, I sat at my new desk, opened my spreadsheet, and drafted the next 50 outreach emails. By the time the first pilot wrapped, I had a routine. Outreach in the morning, client visits a couple times a week, gym in the evenings. Money wasn't rolling in yet, but it was something. What I didn't expect was how fast Marissa's side came after me legally. Within a week, her lawyer got a temporary injunction, a short order limiting me from moving business funds or signing any new contracts above a small cap until disclosures were complete. It didn't stop me from working, but it put a drag on everything and forced me to keep bigger agreements in draft. Rob came over one night with a folder in hand. You're not going to like this, he said, dropping it on my desk. It was a settlement proposal drafted by her lawyer. I skimmed through the pages and had to stop halfway to make sure I was reading it right. She wanted the car. Not shocking, it was in her name. She also wanted the apartment. Even with my name on the lease, her lawyer said they'd ask the court to give her exclusive possession until the term ran out. But then I saw the kicker, a demand for aggressive spousal support tied to my future income. Her reasoning was spelled out in black and white. She had sacrificed her best years to support me. I leaned back in the chair. Her best years apparently had an expiration date. Rob smirked but didn't laugh. "Don't sign anything," he said. "This isn't a proposal, it's a cash grab. We'll respond when we're ready." So we built a plan. Rob walked me through how discovery worked, what we could ask for, what we'd have to provide, and how to organize everything. We cleared the top shelf of my little metal cabinet and started labeling folders. Communications, financials, assets, timelines, each one with tabs and sticky notes. The first thing Rob drilled into me was consistency. Every text, every email, every screenshot, printed, dated, filed. Every expense related to my work or living situation, logged and backed up. Paper trails win cases, he said. I took it seriously. Marissa wasn't quiet on her end either. She kept posting pictures on Instagram like nothing had changed. New clothes, brunches, and one that really caught my attention. A shot of her standing in a condo I didn't recognize, all modern furniture and polished wood floors. The caption read, "Fresh starts." I compared the timestamp of that post to the date she'd served me papers. She'd moved out fast. Too fast. Discovery later showed her new lease had been executed a week before I was served, with first month's rent and the deposit wired 2 days earlier. The timing wasn't grief. It was prep. It got stranger when I noticed Greg's car in the reflection of the window. Same spin class Greg who'd been her just a friend. That set me digging. I cross-checked Venmo history from when we were still sharing some accounts. Payments from her to S-King kept popping up, her sister. Notes attached said things like branding, design work, and consulting. Problem was, Marissa's sister was a nurse. No branding business on the side, no consulting gigs. I dug deeper. Remembered one vendor name she'd mentioned in passing when bragging about helping Greg with business ideas. Looked them up online, found they'd issued invoices to an LLC registered under her sister's name. That didn't add up. I showed Rob. He raised his eyebrows. That's interesting. If she's funneling money through her sister, that's concealment. We can subpoena this. So we did. Rob filed a request for financial disclosures tied to that LLC. Weeks later, the documents came back. Transfers, invoices, payments, all during our separation. Most labeled as consulting fees from Greg's company. The total was over $80,000. Rob filed a countersuit for concealment of assets and restitution and simultaneously moved to dissolve the injunction. Until the court heard it, I kept my projects under the cap and parked deposits in a segregated account. We weren't shouting. We were just lining up receipts. I flipped through the pages, shaking my head. She created a fake business under her sister's name, then ran money through it to hide it? Looks that way, Rob said. And the best part is, she left the timestamps right there. No way to spin this as old money or an accident. While Rob built the case, I kept stacking clients. Tony at the crossdock referred me to a buddy who managed a small distribution center across town. I walked through, pointed out their staging inefficiencies, and gave them the same kind of 2-page plan. They tried it, saw improvement, and signed me for a short-term contract. That turned into another referral. Within a month, I had 3 paying clients. Nothing glamorous, small warehouses with dusty floors and tired managers. But every one of them gave me thank you emails. I screenshotted those too, not for court, but to remind myself the work mattered. My deliverables were always the same. Simple graphs of before and after dwell times, photos of reorganized lanes, bullet points of savings in hours. No fluff, just proof. The clients respected it because it looked like results, not sales talk. Between the contracts and the subpoena evidence, I felt like the pieces were finally lining up. I wasn't rich, but I wasn't broke. I wasn't shouting or chasing, just documenting and building. About a month earlier, my dad's old business partner had asked me to advise his new startup and said he'd grant me a small block of advisory shares down the line. At that point, there was nothing to disclose. No grant, no vesting, just an email and a promise that sounded bigger than it was. A tiny blurb would pop up later and make it look like a windfall, but at the time, it was just paper. One night, I sat at my desk surrounded by stacks of paper and labeled folders. Rob handed me a fresh binder and said, "Name it." I wrote on the cover in black marker, LLC Inflows. That binder felt heavier than it was. Not just paper, but proof. Proof she'd lied. Proof she'd tried to game the system. Proof I wasn't crazy for suspecting. I slid it onto the shelf next to the others. Row by row, tab by tab, the case was taking shape. And for the first time since she'd walked out with iced coffees and divorce papers, I felt like I wasn't playing defense anymore. When you're buried in paperwork, you end up finding things you didn't know you still had. That's how the therapy recordings came back into play. About a year before the split, Marissa had pushed us into couples counseling. She framed it as preventive maintenance, the kind of thing all serious couples supposedly do. I agreed because at the time, I thought maybe an outside perspective could help. The sessions were with Dr. Lanning, an older guy who spoke softly and had a way of making long silences uncomfortable. He structured things differently than I expected. Some sessions were joint, both of us in the room. Other times, he split them. Half an hour with me, half with her. He said it gave him a better sense of how we each saw the relationship. On top of that, he recorded everything. At the start, he explained it. Both of you will get access to these audio files afterward, so you can reflect between sessions. We nodded and signed off. After every meeting, he'd email us links. At the time, I barely touched them. But being the type who saves everything, I threw them into a cloud folder. Then I forgot about them. Months later, while building binders for Rob, I stumbled onto that old folder. 6 files, each about an hour long. I clicked one out of curiosity, headphones in, and started listening. The first few minutes were standard therapy talk. Me explaining stress at work, her talking about wanting more ambition from me. Then the audio shifted. It was one of her solo sessions. I recognized the cadence in her voice, calm, not emotional, like she was talking through a business plan. I just need him to look like the bad guy so I can walk away with everything, she said. There was a pause. Then Dr. Lanning's voice. So you've already decided you want to leave the marriage? Yes, she said. I've decided, but it'll go better if he looks like the problem. That way I get the apartment, the car, and sympathy. I froze. I remembered being in the waiting room for that half hour, probably scrolling my phone while she said it. I hadn't heard it live. Now, listening months later, it felt like a puzzle piece snapping into place. Back then, if I had known, maybe I would have reacted differently. But in that moment at my desk, I didn't yell, didn't throw the headphones. I just sat there, staring at the floor and thought, so it really was a plan. Not stress, not miscommunication. A plan. I marked the timestamp, replayed it twice, and then emailed it to Rob with the subject line, "Listen at 4211. 5 minutes later, my phone lit up. Holy hell, Rob said, skipping hello. She admitted it. She literally mapped it out. Yeah, I said. On tape. Rob was already in lawyer mode. These were provided to both of you? Yep. Same links. Both of us had access. And you still have the originals? In my cloud, untouched. That means chain of custody is clean, he said. Next step is verifying with the therapist. The following week, Rob reached out to Dr. Lanning. To his credit, the man was professional. He confirmed he still had the master files, with metadata intact. Nothing altered, he told Rob. And yes, both parties were aware of recording. I can certify that. That was all Rob needed. Game changer, Rob told me after. We don't use this to humiliate her. We use it to prove she was negotiating in bad faith from the start. Judges care about intent. While Rob filed the paperwork, I focused on the business side. Referrals followed. Same playbook, bigger docs, same results. That little email mattered more than the check. It was proof that I could deliver real value, not just talk about what I used to do. Right around then, Marissa texted again. This time, it wasn't a throwaway. She wrote, "I'm proud of you. Sorry for everything. Can we talk?" I stared at the message for a moment, then hit screenshot. Filed it. I wasn't naive. If she really wanted to reconcile, she wouldn't have hired a shark lawyer to squeeze me for money. Rob appeared as my counsel on the case. His partner signed the filings, but Rob argued the motions. At the next hearing, Rob filed a motion to admit the recordings. He argued it clean. Your Honor, these files show Ms. King wasn't participating in good faith. She was strategizing to manipulate the divorce outcome. Her lawyer objected immediately, claimed private therapy shouldn't be weaponized. The judge wasn't moved. Both parties consented to recordings, he said. Therapist confirmed authenticity and chain of custody. Motion granted. The exhibits weren't sealed, so the admitted audio and transcript excerpts became part of the public record. When we walked out, Rob looked at me with that rare grin he had when things aligned. She thought therapy was her shield. Turns out it's our sword. I didn't celebrate. I went home, cooked chicken and rice, and updated my client spreadsheet. That was the difference between us. She played games. I stacked proof. Depositions aren't like TV. No shouting, no dramatic slamming of papers. Just a table, a recorder, and a lot of questions that sound boring until someone slips. Marissa came in with her lawyer and a folder she barely looked at. Sunglasses stayed on until she sat down, like she wanted to make an entrance. Rob, my attorney, sat across from her, calm, pen in hand, not even glancing up at the posturing. He started easy: dates, addresses, confirming she'd filed for divorce, confirming she'd requested disclosures. Then he slid one page across the table. Can you explain the purpose of this LLC registered under your sister's name? Her fingers froze on the folder. What LLC? Rob didn't flinch. The one filed May 11th of last year. I have the articles of organization. Your sister is listed as owner, but you're on the lease agreement for its office address. Bank records show deposits tied to this LLC during your separation. Her lawyer jumped in. We object to the characterization. Rob cut him off politely. You'll have your chance. For now, I'm asking the witness. What was the purpose of this LLC? Marissa blinked, licked her lips. It was a consulting thing. Branding. Just ideas. Consulting for who? I don't remember. Rob leaned back. You don't remember receiving over $80,000 in payments labeled as consulting fees from Greg Harlan's company during the separation? Her lawyer stiffened. She tried to answer, then stopped. I'd have to see the documents. Rob slid the bank statements across. They're here. She didn't speak for 10 full seconds. Finally, I don't recall the specifics. The recorder caught everything. After the deposition wrapped, Rob whispered to me on the way out, she cracked. Even if she backtracks later, the pause alone says plenty. The hearing a week later was a different stage entirely. The courtroom smelled like wood polish and old carpet. Judge Reynolds sat high, glasses low on his nose. Marissa arrived in beige cashmere like she was there for a photo shoot, not litigation. Her lawyer opened strong, arguing I had hidden equity from her during the divorce, referring to the shares I'd received in my father's old partner's startup. They waved around a Forbes blurb as proof I'd been sitting on value the whole time. When it was our turn, Rob stood calm, one hand in his pocket, the other flipping through a binder. Your Honor, let's walk through the timeline. Mr. Smith received those shares 28 days after the divorce was finalized. At the time of settlement, they had zero liquid value. Meanwhile, he clicked a remote and a screen lit up behind him. Ms. King created an LLC under her sister's name prior to the divorce, funneled over $80,000 into it from a third party, and concealed those assets. The judge looked up, eyebrow raised. Is there documentation? Rob clicked again. Bank statements filled the screen. Yes, Your Honor. And there's more. He paused. We also have authenticated therapy recordings where Ms. King admitted she intended to make Mr. Smith look like the bad guy so she could walk away with the apartment, the car, and sympathy. The therapist confirmed chain of custody. These were joint counseling sessions with both parties' consent. Marissa shifted in her seat, arms crossed. That's when she lost it. I sacrificed my youth for him, she shouted, cutting off her lawyer mid-sentence. I wasted the best years of my life supporting a man who couldn't even buy me a thoughtful birthday gift. And now he wants to drag me through the mud? The room went silent. Even the clerk stopped typing. Judge Reynolds set his pen down. Ms. King, if you interrupt proceedings again, I will hold you in contempt. Do I make myself clear? She sank back, face tight, but nodded. Rob didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He laid out each piece of evidence methodically. Shares granted after the divorce. No omission. LLC created before the divorce. Clear concealment. Recordings. Proof of intent. The contrast couldn't have been clearer. One side came with documents, timestamps, and receipts. The other came with outbursts. When Reynolds gave his ruling, his tone was measured but final. The injunction on Mr. Smith's business is lifted immediately. Further, Ms. King's concealment of assets during divorce proceedings constitutes bad faith. She is ordered to pay restitution. I didn't react. No smile, no fist pump. Just sat there with a straight face, watching Marissa shrink in her chair. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed even the bailiff raise an eyebrow like he couldn't believe the meltdown he'd just witnessed. When the gavel came down, Rob leaned toward me. That's a win. I just nodded. In the hallway afterward, Marissa tried to close the distance. She hurried up, calling my name, her heels clicking against the tile. Callan, can we just talk? Off the record? I stopped, looked at her, then shook my head. This stays with counsel. Her face hardened, like she wasn't used to being told no. Before she could say more, Rob stepped between us. All communication goes through me, through. She glared at him, then turned and walked the other way. I watched her go without a word, then followed Rob out the courthouse doors. The ruling didn't end things. If anything, it lit the fuse for the next round. 2 weeks after Judge Reynolds ordered restitution, Rob called me. She's appealing, he said flatly. Not to overturn the whole judgment, just to reduce the restitution. The filing claimed the amount would financially ruin her and erase any chance of rebuilding. Her lawyer attached letters, friends, co-workers, even a therapist she'd recently started seeing. Each one painted her as stressed, misunderstood, and genuinely regretful. On appeal, she argued restitution would ruin her. Two friends flipped. One sent us a sworn note admitting Marissa had planned the optics. Another withdrew rather than sign a false statement. The court let their statements in. Her credibility sagged. Once filings were public, snippets hit local gossip. I didn't engage. Marissa, of course, turned to social media. She posted a picture of herself sipping wine on a balcony with the caption, "Some people forget who built them." The comments section was a mix of fire emojis, sympathy replies, and a few digs. I screenshotted it, saved it in the binder. Meanwhile, the fallout hit her work. She'd been running freelance marketing gigs, relying on personal branding to land clients. One by one, those clients started dropping her. A design agency posted a statement. "We were unaware of ongoing litigation involving Ms. King. We no longer endorse her services." Others quietly removed her from their websites. Her name became toxic in the small circle she worked in. By the end of the quarter, her LLC account had dried up. A month later, she filed for bankruptcy. Rob moved to have the restitution declared non-dischargeable due to fraud, and the court agreed. The judgment survived the bankruptcy. Time didn't wash it away. I just kept stacking contracts on my side. By then, I had 4 steady clients, enough cash flow to think about expansion, and the first donation pledged to a foundation I was setting up in my dad's name, something to support underprivileged teens interested in logistics and tech. That's where she showed up again. One afternoon, my assistant buzzed me. "There's a woman here asking for 5 minutes. No cameras, no lawyers. She says she doesn't want trouble." I walked out into the lobby. Marissa was standing there. No makeup, hair pulled back, sweater wrinkled. Not the polished version she used to parade. She looked smaller. Not physically, but in presence. She was holding a sealed envelope. When I stopped in front of her, she handed it to me. "Just this," she said quietly. I opened it on the spot. Inside was a photo. Our wedding day. Sunset on the beach. Both of us smiling like we believed it would last. On the back, in her handwriting, "I was wrong about everything. I didn't understand your silence. Now I do. I wouldn't have answered either." I folded the photo, slid it back into the envelope, and looked at her. "I wish you peace," I said. That was all. Her eyes flicked up like she wanted me to say more. I didn't. I turned and walked back into the office. She didn't follow. That night, Rob and I went over the paperwork. He asked if I wanted to enter the note into evidence. I shook my head. No need. It says more to me than it ever will to a judge. Rob leaned back in his chair. Then it's just another page in the file called "Too Late." He wasn't wrong. The final hearing wasn't supposed to be dramatic. It was scheduled as a procedural wrap-up, finalize restitution, close out the countersuit, sign the last compliance documents. Everyone expected it to be quick. By then, months had passed since the last court date. My business was steady, the foundation had launched its first warehouse workshop, and Rob was buried under his firm's trial calendar. The case felt like background noise, just paperwork waiting to be stamped. But courtrooms have a way of surprising you. Marissa arrived 10 minutes early. No lawyer this time. She couldn't afford one anymore. She represented herself, carrying a thin folder that looked empty compared to Rob's stack of binders. She wore a plain blouse, hair tied back, no jewelry. She looked older than her age, not in years but in weight, the kind that comes from running out of angles. When the judge entered, everyone stood. He glanced at the docket and got right to business. "We are finalizing the matter of restitution and closing the countersuit. Ms. King, you are here voluntarily, correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," she said quietly. "Mr. Smith?" I nodded. Rob confirmed there were no new motions. The judge looked satisfied. "Very well. Unless there is further input, we will move to close." That's when Marissa raised her hand. "Permission to speak?" The judge sighed but waved her forward. Briefly. She turned, not to him, but to me. Her eyes locked onto mine like the whole room had disappeared. "I know I've lost," she started. "I know I deserve what's happened. Maybe not the way it happened, but the outcome. I just need you to know something. Not for court, not for money, for me." Rob shifted in his chair, uneasy, but I stayed still. "When we met, I really did love you. I thought we'd be the couple that makes it, but life happened. Stress, jealousy, my own insecurities. I blamed you for everything. I thought you were holding me back." Her voice cracked. "I was wrong. About you, about me, about everything." The courtroom was silent. Even the clerk stopped typing. For the first time in years, I really looked at her, and I could see she wasn't lying. Not anymore. But it didn't matter. Because truth that comes too late sounds like fiction. The judge cleared his throat. Ms. King, that's enough. We're here for closure, not speeches. She sat down, wiping her face. The judge signed the documents, stamped the case closed, and hit the gavel. Court adjourned. Everyone stood. I gathered my papers. Marissa stayed seated, staring at me like she was waiting for a word, a nod, anything. I walked past her without stopping. But it wasn't the end. 2 weeks later, a letter came in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single photo of Max, the dog she'd taken. On the back she'd written, I gave him to a family with a yard. He's happy. Thought you should know. No plea, no manipulation, just that. I filed it away with the rest. By then, my company had doubled in size. We'd secured steady contracts with regional distributors, and I incorporated and took the CEO title. The foundation grew alongside it. On Saturdays, we ran warehouse workshops for teenagers, teaching them the basics of operations, efficiency, and leadership. It was the kind of work my dad would have been proud of. Months later, I was leaving the foundation office one evening when I saw her waiting outside. She looked thinner, tired, holding a worn handbag like it was armor. Callan, please, she said, stepping forward. 5 minutes. I glanced at Rob, who was walking out with me. He looked at me as if to say, your call. I nodded for him to hang back. She started soft. I can't undo what I did, but I miss who we were. I miss us. I don't want money. I don't want anything. Just a chance to talk. Please. Her eyes welled up. For a moment, I stayed silent. Then she reached out, whispering, I'd do anything to fix this. I finally spoke. The time to fix it was when you still had it. Her face crumpled, but just as quick, the softness shifted. Her voice hardened, sharper, almost angry. You think you're perfect now? You think all this success makes you better than me? Don't forget, I made you. I built you up when you were nothing. Without me, you'd still be in some dusty warehouse moving pallets. I tilted my head. And yet, here we are. Her mouth opened, then shut. She looked at me for a long second, like she wanted to scream or beg again, but nothing came out. Finally, she turned and walked away. I didn't follow. That was the real ending. Not the court gavel, not the stamped documents. This. Her begging, then flipping back to entitlement. It was the last reminder of who she really was. The truth is, she didn't miss me. She missed control. The version of me who bent whenever she blinked. That man was gone. I went back inside, locked up, and drove home. Elise called while I was on the road. We talked about a book she was reading, nothing dramatic, nothing heavy, and I realized that was the real win. Not court rulings or contracts, but peace. Sometimes I think about Marissa, not with hate, not with longing, just awareness. She's out there somewhere, starting over. Maybe she'll heal. Maybe she'll repeat the same cycle. I don't know, and I don't check. Because closure isn't something someone else gives you. It's the silence you choose to keep. YouTube just dropped this new hype feature. If you're hooked on this story, smash that hype button. It tells YouTube this video deserves to blow up, and it keeps even crazier stories coming your way.